Good Sunday afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to After All. We are going to take a walk around the property as we catch up for a bit. I've taken to the outdoors because it's just so beautiful out today. If you guys haven't taken up a practice of going on more family walks than you usually do, I would say do it. Start right now. It's a beautiful afternoon. It's a great time to get out into nature, and despite the fact there's more people going outside than usual, it's still not that full out here. It's still pretty nice. So, keep your social distancing up, but go for a walk. As you are out going for a walk, you will notice the sidewalk. It is bare in most places, and I think this is a shame. I think this is a huge place for free real estate to reign, and I think you guys should take advantage of it. So, this week's Sunday challenge is to chalk your walk. Now, maybe you don't know what chalk your walk is. Maybe you do. Doesn't matter. It goes like this. You take some form of art, usually chalk, and you put it all over the walk, right in front of your house. Do something encouraging. Put up some Bible verses that'll make people smile. Make a picture that'll make people smile. Help the people that are walking around in your neighborhood to feel encouraged. And if you don't have a sidewalk, then work on a sign. Send us what you do, take a video of it, take a picture of it. I want to see how hard you guys work on it. The more effort you put into it, the better it's going to turn out, so the more points I'll give you. You guys can check back on the website to see your scores. We'll add together your quiz points, we'll add together your challenge points, and each week we'll have a winner that receives a prize from us. So, tell us what you did by showing us what you did. So the last time that we were together on a Sunday was quite some time ago, but if you recall, we were studying through the book of Genesis, and in Genesis we were on chapter 30, at least that was the last one we finished. In chapter 30 we got to see Jacob applying his knowledge of being a shepherd, and apparently a really intelligent shepherd who noticed the passing of genetic traits between his goats and sheep and stuff, and applying that knowledge in such a way that he made a bunch of money. He became incredibly wealthy off of his employer and his uncle and his father-in-law, Laban. And yes, that is an incredibly complicated relationship. I can't even imagine what that would be like. Anyways, this week we're going to move on to chapter 31 in Genesis. So, go get your Bible, wherever you've got it, pull out a Bible app, look up Genesis 31. I'm going to be reading out of the New Living Translation. If that's what you got, great. If it's not, that's okay. Just have to do a little cross-translation in your head. But go ahead and open up your Bible to Genesis, find chapter 31, and let's get started. So, verse 1 starts out like this. But Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. Jacob has robbed our father of everything, they said. He has gained all his wealth at our father's expense. And Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude towards him. Now, all of your wealth at your employer's expense, that actually makes sense. If that's your only job, then of course whatever wealth you have comes from your employer. That's normal. But what they're getting at is a little beyond that. They're saying that it's actually costing Laban more than Laban is making. So they're saying that Laban is making less than what Jacob is making. And I think that's true. I don't think they're overstepping when they say that. That's actually what we saw in the last chapter, that no matter how Laban sliced it, no matter how he tried to set the wages of Jacob, Jacob always made more. And we're going to find out in this chapter, Laban actually changed those wages several times. So, keep reading, verse 3. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your father and grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you. So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he was watching his flock. He said to them, I have noticed that your father's attitude toward me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. You know how hard I have worked for your father, and that part's true, but he has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times. But God has not allowed him to do me any harm. For if he said, the speckled animals will be your wages, then the whole flock began to produce speckled young. And when he changed his mind and said, the striped animals will be your wages, then the whole flock produced striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me. Now, pause. That is not completely honest. It is partially honest. It's honest in the sense that that is what happened. The wages would get changed and the flock would produce. That did actually happen. What's not honest is that he's putting it all on God, and God did show him some stuff, and God did recommend some stuff, but it's not like God's doing it alone. That's the part he's leaving out. Jacob actually played a role in making sure certain kinds of sheep would be born more often, certain kinds of goats would be born more often. He was in charge of breeding, so he got to have a hand in the process of who bred with who, and therefore what kind of sheep, what kind of lambs, what kind of goats, would be born. So it's not all on God, and it's not, out of Jacob's control. That's the key here. It's not out of his control. Then in verse 10, he reveals something to his wives. He says, one time during the mating season, I had a dream and saw that the male goats mating with the females were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then in my dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob, and I replied, yes, here I am. The angel said, look up and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen how Laban has treated you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now, get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth. So, we'll get to see a little more of that conversation. What's revealed here is that some of this advice is actually coming straight from God in the form of a vision. Now, we don't get a clear timeline because we see what he did last chapter, and we're finding out about the message from God this chapter, the chapter after. So which order the events took place in, how far apart, where he got the idea, was it his own and God confirmed it? Was it all from God? It's not 100% clear, but he's putting it all on God. Now, we don't know how honest he's being, so it's a little tricky to say, but essentially, God has a part, Jacob has a part, and that's really all that's important. Then we get the response in verse 14. Rachel and Leah responded, that's fine with us, the whole return to your country thing. That's fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway. Verse 15, he has reduced our rights to those of foreign women, and after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. All the wealth God had given you from our father legally belongs to us and our children, so go ahead and do whatever God has told you. So this is good in a sense. He's revealing to his wives that God wants him to go back to his home country, a place they've never been before. And that would mean leaving their whole family, all their friends, everything outside of their immediate family behind. And for any family, that's huge. Any of you who've moved cross-country, it is a big deal. It really changes a lot. It puts a ton of stress on everyone in the family. Everything changes. It's very hard to adapt. And when he tells his wives, I want to move across country, I want to go back where my people came from, that should be something he has to sell them on or talk them into or give them time to adjust to the idea. And instead, no, their relationship with their dad is so bad at this point, they just say, yes, let's do it. Let's go. Now, the buying and selling thing, we talked about this a few chapters back, but it's been a long time since then. Essentially, back then, and a while since then too, up until the last few hundred years, men would pay dowries to a woman's family when they were going to get married. And the dowry was a means of insuring against his death, insuring against him divorcing her later. Anything where she would be left without him to provide for her, she would get to use that dowry, the amount of money or goods that the husband gives to her family, as a way to survive and keep on living. So that dowry would be given to the dad of the girl, and the dad would look after it, or he'd invest it, or put it in the bank, whatever. In this case, we find out, as we kind of foreshadowed and alluded to weeks and weeks and weeks ago, that Laban is not responsible with it, and everything that Jacob gives to Laban, and that's a complicated giving, but he does give to Laban. Laban wastes. He wastes. What did Jacob give? Well, remember, he walked to their country empty-handed. So he didn't have any money, he didn't have any gold, he didn't have any goods to give for Laban's daughters. Instead, Jacob worked without pay for 7 years for daughter 1 and 7 more years for daughter 2. Not really the thing he was hoping for. He wanted to just marry one of them, but that's a whole other story. If you want to go back a few chapters, you can find that one. Anyways, 14 years of wages. Ask your dad how much he makes. Ask your mom how much she makes. Whoever works, ask them how much they make. Add up the money for a year's wages and then multiply that by 14. You get a sense that, like, even for a family that's not rich, 14 years of wages is a ton of money. And this was supposed to be set aside and saved for those daughters if something were to happen to Jacob. It doesn't sound like Laban did that. So they say, you know what, Dad's not looking out for us. Let's just go. We're done. We're done. Then we get to verse 17. So Jacob put his wives and children on camels, and he drove all his livestock in front of him. He packed all the belongings he had acquired in Padan Aram and set out for the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. At the time they left, Laban was some distance away, shearing his sheep. Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. Jacob outwitted Laban the Aramean, for they set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. So Jacob took all his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River, heading for the hill country of Gilead. So leaving without saying anything is a bad idea if it's your boss. Okay? Leaving without saying anything is a bad idea if it's even your uncle. Leaving without saying anything to your father-in-law, or for the girls, their father, that's a terrible idea. I don't know how bad your family relations have to be for this to be a good idea. I think they would kind of have to want you dead for this to be a good idea. Kind of the whole Jacob-Esau situation. But as long as you're not on those terms, say goodbye. At least they don't. They leave. They say nothing. Now, notice there was a verse in there. I don't know if you caught it. Right in the end of 19, it says, Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. You got to know, at this point in history, not everyone is worshiping God. Not everyone is following the one true God. It's not the case. Tons of people at this point in history, tons of people at almost any point in history, do not follow the one true God. They follow some other made-up God. So Laban is one of those. And Laban has these household idols. Now, maybe he tried to do the balancing act. We see that a lot of times in the Bible. There's people who believe in the one true God, and they also believe there's other gods too. And they just, they pick whoever's convenient today, and that's who they're going to worship. Maybe Laban was one of those guys. I don't know. We don't see like a ton of where Laban's faith is. Not a lot of instances. But we do know he has household idols. We know that part for sure. Rachel takes those. So Rachel steals them as she runs away. Now, why would she do this? Well, if you recall, Jacob fell in love with Rachel first. He worked 7 long years to marry her, and when the wedding day comes, Laban tricks everyone, it seems, and he switches them. He switches the older and the younger sister so that Leah, the older sister, goes and gets married to Jacob. Now, they used veils. It probably was nighttime. There's lots of reasons why this is even possible, but the point was Laban is the one who did it. So Laban tricks Jacob into marrying the wrong woman. Now, we talked a lot when we studied that chapter about how this made Leah feel. We looked a lot at how, the Bible doesn't mention whether or not she was in on the plan, doing it because of what her dad said, doing it because she wanted to. We don't really get to know. We didn't talk a lot about Rachel, though, and I kind of left that out for this chapter. I didn't think it'd be this long before we got to this chapter. But Rachel was in love with Jacob as well. Rachel had waited 7 years to marry Jacob. So when Leah gets sent in to marry Jacob by surprise, you got to know, that just destroyed Rachel's relationship with her dad. There's no two ways about it. It was never the same. She did eventually get to marry Jacob, but now Jacob is stuck, Rachel is stuck with this 2-wife marriage. Not something they had set out for, not something they had planned for, something kind of tossed on them. A mix by Laban's deception and Jacob's decision, I still want to marry Rachel, I'm going to go through with it. So, all that to say, Rachel's been harboring a huge grudge against her dad. And it's been like 20-ish years since she and Jacob met. It's been something around 13 years since she and Jacob got married. And so there's been, did I get that wrong? Yeah, no, that works. Something like 13 years since they got married. And so she's been angry at her dad this whole time. It's never really cleared up. They've never dealt with it. So now when they're going to leave, this is her last chance to see her dad. Instead of a goodbye or a forgive you or any sort of good parting terms, she steals from him just to, take some revenge before she goes. Then we get into verse 22. 3 days later, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Now you got to know, 3 days later, that's even possible because they didn't live so close. In an agrarian setting where you're trying to have enough land to feed sheep and cattle and all that and goats, you got to have enough land to actually do that. And they have tons. So they have tons of land. They don't live right next door to each other. Therefore, you leave, you might not bump into each other for a few days. You might not realize they left. So 3 days goes by. He gets told Jacob left. Then we get to 23. So he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. He caught up with Jacob 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. So he was hurrying. He had a 3-day lag. Jacob had the 3-day lead. And so 7 days later, now it's 10 days since Jacob set out, they meet up. Verse 24, but the previous night God had appeared to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream and told him, I am warning you, leave Jacob alone. God has put his hand on Jacob, and for better or for worse, God's going to protect Jacob. And God's so cool, he can make it turn out for better, even when it seems like it should be for worse. So, yeah, there it is. God's protecting Jacob. Verse 25, Laban caught up with Jacob as he was camped in the hill country of Gilead, and he set up his camp not far from Jacob's. What do you mean by deceiving me like this? Laban demanded. How dare you drag my daughters away like prisoners of war? That is a big charge. He's saying you took them like a kidnapper. Dang. Verse 27, why did you slip away secretly? Why did you deceive me? And why didn't you say you wanted to leave? That's like a really good point, actually. Why didn't you say you wanted to leave? I would have given you a farewell feast with singing and music accompanied by tambourines and harps. He's saying, I would have got fancy for your goodbye. I would not have been upset with you. I would have celebrated. Verse 28, why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you. But the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. I can understand your feeling that you must go, and your intense longing for your father's home, but why have you stolen my gods? Ooh, there the shoe drops. Okay, we'll pause there for a second. So Laban's actually being more understanding and more reasonable here than he has the whole time we've known him. All the chapters, all the verses that have talked about him, he's been much more stern, conniving, tricksy, like he's never been super duper nice. But now he is. What's the deal? Something's up. Well, it's because he's at the disadvantage. He does say, I could destroy you, and I believe him. Up to this point, as far as we know, Jacob's wealth has been in animals. It's been in livestock. It's not like he has an army of servants or an army. Laban, on the other hand, is kind of the other way around. It seems like he keeps losing out in the livestock department as Jacob excels there, and Laban is just strong in numbers. He has a lot of people working for him. So when he takes all of his men and he goes, he's got a bigger camp than Jacob. But he makes some really good points here. I don't know if we can trust him. It's so hard to tell because the Bible tells you a lot of what happened, and it doesn't always stop to tell you why. Sometimes you get something like in the New Testament or something later in the Bible that references back and gives you a why. In this case, not so much. But we do know he's a guy who's losing his daughters, so that part I tend to trust, that he really is going to miss them. He really would like to have said goodbye. Verse 31, I rushed away because I was afraid, Jacob answered. I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. Maybe that's overreaching, but Laban has been tricksy in the past, so maybe that's really what Jacob thought. Verse 32, but as for your God, see if you can find them, and let the person who has taken them die. And if you find anything else that belongs to you, identify it before all these relatives of ours, and I will give it back. But Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the household idols. So this is one of the first times we see in Jacob's life where he is being completely open, completely vulnerable, and just saying, you know what, check me out, test me, see if I'm being honest, see if I'm for reals. And because he knows he's for real, least himself, he's able to do this. So I want to challenge you guys this week to be open and transparent like Jacob is. Be for real, be honest, be public with your faith. Do something like chalking your walk. Do something like putting a sign up out front that just says, I'm not afraid, I don't care who knows it, I love Jesus. Be open. You've got nothing to hide. That's how Jacob was in this chapter. I want you guys to emulate that. Verse 33, Laban went first into Jacob's tent to search there. So he distrusted Jacob. Then into Leah's, and then the tents of the 2 servant wives, but he found nothing. Finally he went into Rachel's tent. But Rachel had taken the household idols and hidden them in her camel saddle. And now she was sitting on them. She's sitting on the saddle. When Laban had thoroughly searched her tent without finding them, she said to her father, Oh, please, sir, forgive me if I don't get up for you. I'm having my monthly period. So Laban continued to search, but he could not find the household idols. Then Jacob became very angry, and he challenged Laban. What's my crime? He demanded. What have I done wrong to make you chase after me as though I were a criminal? You have rummaged through everything I own. Now show me what you have found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us, before our relatives, for all to see. Let them judge between us. For 20 years I have been with you, caring for your flocks. In all that time, your sheep and goats never miscarried. In all those years, I never used a single ram of yours for food. If any were attacked and killed by wild animals, I never showed you the carcass and asked you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took the loss myself. That means he put his own animals into Laban's flock to pay for one that died. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight or in the dark of night. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through the cold and sleepless nights. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years earning your $2 and then 6 more years for your flock. And you changed my wages 10 times. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, I like that, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. That is a serious telling off. Now, what Jacob did in running away without saying goodbye, that's on Jacob. But Jacob lays some serious charges against Laban here. Laban has been the harshest of employers, and harsh in a monetary way. There's lots of employers that are blunt or ruthless or say things in a cutthroat way. But if a boss doesn't pay you right, you don't stay working there, you go. And Jacob stayed because it was family. He put up with a lot. And now he's putting it all before Laban and saying, you accuse me of stealing when you have been treating me like a thief for 20 years. Too much. Too much for Jacob to bear. So he breaks. He goes off on his tirade. He lays it all before them. Then he makes a treaty with him. Verse 43, Then Laban replied to Jacob, These women are my daughters. These children are my grandchildren. These flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything you see is mine. But what can I do now about my daughters and their children? So come, let's make a covenant, you and I, and it will be a witness to our commitment. So Laban claims all of Jacob's flocks are his own, even though Jacob worked for them. Notice how shrewd he is. Saying they came from him is the same as they are his. And that's not the same, but that's the way he's phrasing it. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a monument. Then he told his family members, gather some stones. So they gathered stones and piled them in a heap. Then Jacob and Laban sat down beside the pile of stones to eat a covenant meal. To commemorate the event, Laban called the place Jegar Sahadutha, which means witness pile in Aramaic. And Jacob called it Galid, which means witness pile in Hebrew. Then Laban declared, This pile of stones will stand as a witness to remind us of the covenant we have made to get today. This explains why it was called Galid, witness pile. But it was also called Mizpah, which means watchtower. For Laban said, May the Lord keep watch between us to make sure that we keep this covenant when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters or if you marry other wives, God will see it even if no one else does. He is a witness to this covenant between us. See this pile of stones, Laban continued, and see this monument I have set between us. They stand between us as witnesses of our vows. I will never pass this pile of stones to harm you, and you may never pass these stones or this monument to harm me. I call on the God of our ancestors, the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of your grandfather Nahor, that's like his great-grandfather, to serve as a judge between us. So Jacob took an oath before the fearsome God of his father Isaac to respect the boundary line. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice to God there on the mountain and invited everyone to a covenant feast. After they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. Laban got up early the next morning, and he kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home. I want to challenge you to be very careful you don't fall into the trap that Rachel falls into. Rachel is ashamed of something, and she doesn't feel like she can bring it out before everyone. She's the thief. She's the one that this whole mix-up is all really about, but it's a secret, so no one knows. And sometimes we feel like that as Christians, that the end of the world is coming, that God's judgment is waiting for everyone at the end of their life, and secretly we're a part of it, and we can't say anything because there's bad things attached. But the truth is, judgment's going to come whether we say anything or not. And grace has the opportunity to come if we do say something. So it is so important to be more like Jacob than like Rachel in this one context. To just say it clearly, to say it out loud, to put it out there for everyone to see, so that people have the chance to ask questions, people have the chance to communicate with us, people have the chance to know. If we keep it to ourselves, then they won't. So that's it. That's my challenge to you. Chalk your walk, make a sign, do something to put your Christianity out there so everyone knows. If I got a question, if I need to know about God, I can come to these people. You could even put that on your sign. With that, I'm going to toss it over to one of our worship leaders, and they're going to lead us in some worship.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. And when I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99, and I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Start making some progress on that challenge and send us the results. Send us photos, send us videos. You can upload all of that at the ccchico.com/afterall page. If you're not already there right now, then it's really easy to find. Just type in ccchico.com/afterall and hit enter, and bada boom, there you are. Hit the upload button, send us those pics, send us those videos. We want to see what you guys have been up to. Send us any videos, really, any pictures. We just want to see what's going on in your life. How are you getting through quarantine without losing your mind? And you know what? Maybe we'll stick it in our video next week. Maybe we'll share it with everyone who's watching, but maybe we won't. Maybe it's of a more personal nature. Maybe you just want to send it to one particular leader. Go ahead. Send it to us with their name on it. We'll get it to them so they can read it, watch it, see it. Maybe it's a book report you're working on. We just want to get connected with you guys, see what's going on in your life. So let us know. Use that upload button to your heart's content. Anyways, tune in on Wednesday. We'll have another quiz for you. I'm thinking I might broadcast from the roof. So if you've never been on the roof of the church, you might finally get to see what it's like. Ooh. Anyways, that's going to be on Wednesday night. Yeah, and then after Wednesday, you should start checking your points online. We're going to have constantly updated point charts showing you how you guys have been doing on the challenges and how you've been doing on the quizzes. And then we'll have some prizes coming your way. At the end of it all, you could win a month of free snack bar, or you could be winning one of our weekly prizes where we'll come and just lob something at you out of our car. Anyways, contact us, use the stuff below, let us know how you're doing. We love you guys, we miss you guys, we can't wait to be back with you again. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye.